In the meantime, I would also like to remind you that this afternoon at 2, we have a lecture series. Today, this afternoon, we have Dr. Rajagopalan, Dr. V. Rajagopalan, one of our illustrious former heads of the department. He was an amazing scholar. I've told you about his library in his house. He has an amazing collection at his home. Uh, so he'll be here this afternoon to give us a lecture as part of the Lumina lecture series that Professor David Wesley is organizing. So in case you are free, we welcome you to participate. I think this is exclusively for you guys. Dr. David Wesley must have passed on the Zoom meeting link to you. If it has not been passed on to you, just remind me, I'll pass it on, but make sure you are there, right? Thank you. Now over to Samanjo.
Yes, sir. So can you see my screen?
Yes, Samanjo, yes. Yes.
So good afternoon, everyone. Lyricists are the most underrated in the film industry. And in this session of Unheard Voices, I would like to talk about my favorite and most underrated lyricist, who is Syed Khadri. Now, before talking about him, I would like to share something which is in my mind for a very long time. Urdu is my mother tongue, and I speak a dialect of Urdu which is called the Dakhni Urdu in my home. I was always fascinated by Urdu poetry, from Gulzar to Kishwar Nahi to Javed Akhtar and many, and I've always enjoyed them all. And if you see, the Bollywood songs that we hear, most importantly, the romantic songs, are in Urdu language and not in Hindi. So most of these songs are in Urdu. Often people mistake it for Hindi and they say that both are same, right? So they both are not the same and they are very different, though they have similarities. So I just wanted to share this thought with everyone. And songs like Channa Mereya and everything is purely Urdu, and Urdu is considered as a poetic language. So the reason for me to take this poet is because I want not just to celebrate an unheard Urdu writer, but also to celebrate Urdu poetry itself and celebrate lyricists of the industry. Now, Syed Khadri is an LIC agent by profession, and he has an inbuilt flair for poetry. So he is a Hindi Urdu poet, and he's the most underrated lyricist in the industry. Now, despite his ample use of Urdu, he is very unique than the other writers. The one characteristic that distinguishes his master lyricist from the rest is a quality that he connotes the perfect mix of all elements. Now, elements like elegant language, new thought, and fresh phrases, simplicity and depth, and a perfect fit with musical meters and phonetics. This makes his poetry and lyrics very unique from other writers, and Syed Khadri has this characteristics in abundance, and his songs directly connect with the listeners' hearts. Now, Syed is a 40-year-old and he's very reserved. He's not there in media very much, and he's very humble and warm. So, even I saw his one interview, because there are no any other interviews of him, though he has done so much work. He has not got that limelight. He is very simple and in nature, but his work separates him from the other lyricists. And you can see this work in some movies like Saya, Murder, Zahir, Life in a Metro, Anwar, and Avarappan. Now, he is a poet introducing Urdu poetry to everyone, but this Urdu poetry he presents is in a very fresh lyrics. That is, his mode is very different, and this lyrics is used in Bollywood movies. Now, Khadri is a Bollywood poet, but what he did was he started reintroducing Urdu poetry to youngsters through his beautiful lyrics. Now, if you see how he came, he in that particular interview, it is just a 4-minute, very informal interview. The voice also is not that clear, which is available in YouTube. He says that he loves to write from school, but then when he understood that he wants to take lyrics or poetry as a profession, he went to Mumbai, and he in the 1980s from Jodhpur, which is his hometown. There he met Mahesh Bhatt, who is the director, who's not very famous at that time, but who is a very good director at that time. But Mahesh Bhatt liked his work, but he couldn't give him any offer because Bhatt did not do any independent film. He was not a producer yet. So Syed returned to his city, and he told that he did not give up writing, but he joined as an LIC agent, and he started working because he was married and he had responsibilities. Luckily, one day he met Mahesh Bhatt again, and then Mahesh Bhatt gave him this work called Jisma. In the movie Jisma, he started write. He gave him a work, and he started writing from there for the movies, and then he became famous. Famous in sense, not him, but his songs. So no one knows who is the man behind these very famous songs, which I'll talk later. Now, after that, he kept on writing, and during this time from 2004 to 2008, there were many movies that this was Mahesh Bhatt's peak career. So he had many movies, and during that time, most of the lyrics were written by Khadri. Now, one thing that Khadri says is that he admits that writing is not his profession and it is his hobby. He wanted to take it as a profession, but he failed because initially he had to face a lot of things. And he believes that there is a revival of thoughtful and meaningful lyrics in Bollywood movie songs, and he tries to induce fresh thoughts in his movies lyrics, keeping them deep and substantial, which the listeners love about him, which I very love about him. Now, Khadri's poetry has proved that Urdu Shairi can be appreciated by older as well as younger generation if it is presented well. Syed lives in Jodhpur, Rajasthan, with his wife and sons, and he is a poet operating from Jodhpur. So he doesn't come and live here, like he doesn't live in Bombay. He lives in Jodhpur and he operates from there. And he says that he doesn't want to come and live this glam life, or he doesn't want this media's attention. Now, when the interviewer asked him, what is your inspiration, or how do you write so well? How is your poetry or lyrics very romantic? He says that दुनिया से जो भी जिंदगी के शक्ल में तजुर्बे मिले हैं वो लौटा रहा हूं मैं. So it means whatever experiences I have got in my life, I'm giving back everything through my writing. And he also says that his inspiration is Sahir Ludhianvi, who's also a poet. Now, he also says that there is no secret behind his songs, and I think, and he says that I think one needs to have certain vision to see life. And he says that there are lots of things around you, and it's up to you how you see it. Now, in the end of the interview, when the interviewer asked, don't you regret not being popular or not being in the media, not being celebrated or not getting the limelight as other writers? So he says, I don't regret or feel bad for not being so famous. I think everyone gets whatever they deserve. All my songs have been extremely popular everywhere. So the songs are always popular. Till today, we hear those songs. And I feel I'm lucky that I've got good music composers and singers to make my poetry popular. As I said, his humble thing that he doesn't regret anything, and he is living just like an LIC agent in Jodhpur. He's still doing some projects, but not as much as he did in those 5 to 6 years. He has given a comeback recently too, but the work is not that big now. But yet, whatever song comes out from his lyrics, I just enjoy it a lot, and I think he's the most underrated writer. Now I'm going to share 3 of his lyrics, which I personally love. And many Urdu writers have given Urdu poetry for lyrics through ages. But what makes him unique in this genre is the perfect blend of simple and complex words, which are easily understandable, and we get the feeling through the lyrics. Now, this song, Fir Le Aaya Dil, is one such lyrics which the lines itself have a musical tone. Now, through his lyrics, one gets to know new Urdu words as an Indian audience, and that is Mayassar, which means available, and Badastur, which means unaltered. So these are the new words which he keeps introducing with the perfect blend of simple language. Now, one more song, the one more song I love is Mola Mere Mola. And this song is like an appreciation for the love, and it is a nazm. And the meaning of the song is so nice that it's not a, I mean, the translation does not give justice to it, because I saw a lot of translations. I tried translating too, but I asked my mom also for help, but then that doesn't do justice for it, because Mola Mere Mola is very unique. And if you see, the song is very popular from that time, but no one knows the man behind the song, which is the writer and the lyricist Syed Khadri. The last lyrics which I want to share is Teri Jiki Nazar. It is a rhythmical tone. It has a very rhythmical tone, and we don't need music for this. I believe, because even without music, the lines itself has very musical tone, and this choice of words, as I said, is a blend of both easy and difficult. So if you see, the this translation does very justice to the lines itself. So this one is a good translation. If you see, the lines itself has a very musical tone. You don't understand Urdu. Many of you don't under most of you don't understand Urdu, but if you can see, the lines itself has a very unique musical tone and rhyming words. So that is why I said that you don't need music for it. Now, that's it. And I would like to conclude by saying that the real unheard voices, according to me, are the lyricists. They are the man behind the songs. They are the writers whose poems are given voices and tunes. But the music and tunes are often appreciated than them, and we forget who is the man behind the writing. Thank you. So that's it, sir.
Thank you, Samanjum. That was amazing. And the way you concluded it, signed off, was very, very good. See, I think you can even do your piece, your MA project, your dissertation on Syed Qadri, because I feel the concluding lines that you said, I think they are the real unheard voices, because the musicians and those who set it to, the others, they often find themselves in the limelight, accolades, celebration, celebrated. But these lyricists who pen them, they don't deserve the recognition. So, real unheard voices are the lyricists. That was a wonderful, revelatory line and a celebratory line as well. And about uh, his language, his fresh phrases, very good. And his songs directly connect to the listeners. And he's not on social media. A real unheard voice then. Right? Whatever experience I've got in my life and giving back through my writing. This is exactly what we also strive to do, right? You guys also strive to do. We also strive to do. Whatever experience you've got in your life, right? Put it down. If you're not putting it down in pen and paper, I'm telling you, as literary souls, you are doing a great injustice to yourself, to your blessed life that you've been bestowed by nature, by God, whatever beautiful experiences that you've got, pen them, put them down in pen and paper. Sama Anjum has given us this wonderful line: whatever experience I've got in my life, I'm giving back through my writing. And I'll just like to connect this with J. Krishnamurti, who said, look around, observe. He uses a beautiful phrase, pay attention. To observe, you must have freedom, he says. And freedom is without the me. I should not judge whatever I observe. Then I can put it down. Thank you, Sam Anjum. That was a real unheard voice, and I'm sure this will resonate in our hearts and minds in the days and years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes. So now we'll have Pravina is there, or Shannon Patricia. Right? Shannon, yes.
Yes, sir. Just a
Yes.
minute, sir. I'll present my screen, sir.
In the meantime, block the day on the 11th of this month, 11th November, that is the 11th month, the 11th day at 11 a.m. So you'll have a great scholar from Calcutta Jadavpur University, Dr. Jaydeep Sarangi. He'll be giving us a lecture, right? It's at 11 sharp. So I want you all to be there. It might be both online and offline, because he's paying a visit to Chennai. So we thought of making the best use of this great scholar who will be with us on that particular morning.
So, good afternoon, everyone. The writer who I chose today is Mary Corelli. I'll tell the reason as to why I chose a Victorian novelist instead of an Indian. Um First, I'd like to introduce her. She is the most renowned women Victorian novelist of the time. This is something which I like so much, because we have heard so many Victorian novelists who are mostly males. It is also said that she was very popular, and she almost her works managed to outthrow the publication works of Charles Dickens. And it so shook me that she was not sufficiently heard by the major popular literary stream. And moving on to the introduction about Mary Corelli, Mary Corelli is nothing but it's her pen name which she used for her original name, Mary McKay. The reason is mainly is that she had the inner guilt of being born as an illegitimate daughter to Mr. Charles McKay. And it is said that she also wanted to eradicate that idea of shame that is associated with the idea of being an illegitimate child. And and later she was christened to be Mary Corelli. She was born in 1st May 1855 in London, and in her novels, mostly she tries to critique the Victorian snobbishness and the hypocrisy that is associated mostly with the Victorian society. She is originally Britain, and due to her major settings in a novel, like it mostly focuses on the Italian settings, and it's very elite. So critics also suspect that she could possibly be part of some other origin. And she has written a whopping number of novels. It is about 30 in number. And one thing which also strikes me about her very much is that she has not restricted herself to one particular genre or one particular medium of literature. She has written novels, she has written prose, she has written essays, she has written pamphlets, and she has also written articles. Whatever possible medium she was exposed to, she actually managed to put out her ideas in various different mediums of literature. And her mainly varied from romance, spiritualism, mysticism, fantasy, science, and religion. And with regards to this idea of spiritualism, Mary was a staunch Catholic, but she also came up with this novel called Master Christian, which literally shook the entire Victorian society, because she came up with striking, contrasting views, which was so revelatory and which was so shaking for the Victorian public. And with the idea of romance, though Mary did not mind about the critics speaking ill about her. Her romance is very high, and she is often criticized for being so explicit and being so cold. Moving on to the work which I would like to discuss here is the novel Thelma. It spans to about 600 pages. And one thing which I like most about the novel is that if you read the novel, you will it almost gives you the feeling that you get from the most celebrated Victorian novel, that is Wuthering Heights. Both have the same thrill. It just manages the thrill and the suspense despite being a passionate love story. And Thelma was not only this particular novel. Most of her novels were so path-breaking, and they managed to sell out in various copies, like 5,000 copies within the first 2 weeks. And and one more fascinating facet about this author is that she, despite being a woman, she was the most popular and most highly paid women novelist in the Victorian era. And and her readers were not restricted only to the elite society or to the working class. Her readers were in wide ranges, like even general public read her works. And It also ranged to high-profile people like Queen Victoria herself, and even the most celebrated writer R.K. Narayan was very much fond of Mary's writings. It is also said that then Prime Minister William Gladstone was also very fond of Mary's writings. Coming up to this particular work, it is a passionate love story. The protagonist is a Norwegian lady named Thelma. She is said to be very knowledgeable. She has mastery over various languages, but she is very beautiful, and this in a sense fascinates an English gentleman named Sir Philip Errington, and he tries to win her hand in marriage. And the main challenge that is dealt in the novel is that Thelma moves to England to be with her husband, and the Victorian society and especially the women around her plot various strategies to break the marriage. Here, particularly, Mary likes to focus on the Victorian hypocrisy that is associated, especially with the portrayal of women. She is very much known for a descriptive writing. Mary is very much descriptive about situations and even about things and people around her. And I would like to read one particular passage from the novel, which discusses about the women who plot against the marriage. There were those who had no ideas beyond dress and show, others that looked upon their husbands as pieces of furniture, others having nothing better to do went in for spiritualism. Then there were the women atheists, creatures who had voluntarily crushed all the sweetness of sex within them, foolish human flowers without fragrance. There were the platform women, unnatural products of an unnatural age. There were the amateur actresses, patronizing the drawing room stage as an opportunity for displaying themselves in extravagant costumes. And there were the professional beauties who owed everything to elegant attire and face cosmetics. Not only this, the very way in which Mary tries to explain the Norwegian wilderness and the Norwegian setup is also very much captivative. And critics also say that it is this particular skill of Mary that won her so much fame and popularity during the Victorian age. And the novel is not lacking in action or adventure in any sort of sense. It is very interesting and very quick paced, in a sense that it does not bore the audience with usual and stereotypical explanations regarding love. And one more critical opinion about Mary is that critics did not like her because she was so popular and she was a woman. And despite all that, she continued to write. And they tried to defame her by saying that she is very extravagant and she is very explicit about her descriptions. But they also critic her regarding her language. They said that it lacked grace and kindness. They say that it's very raw and wild, which is why I was reminded of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights when I read this novel. And Mary was mostly accused for the fact that she only focused on the audience rather than what impact she would have on them. She only tried to quench their thirst for literature, and she was accused that she wrote only for the sake of the popular taste for sensationalism. And even though she was heavily criticized, she managed to be so popular, and the thing that she managed to her novels managed to outgrow the publications of Charles Dickens was that which shocked me the most. Even though critics were so vehement, were so hateful about her, the fact that she had got a wide range of readership from right from the Queen, the Prime Minister, and to major writers of her era, and even to the common public, is what is very fascinating according to me. And I would like to conclude by saying that even though we have heard many Victorian writers or poets Browning, uh, Browning and Bronte sisters, and we have also heard of George Eliot. Mary is very unique in a sense, in this sense that she focused on a wide genre of writing, and despite the critics, being a woman, she tried to outgrow the massive literary giant Charles Dickens. Uh, Even though she is not much she was not much celebrated like the other male authors, I would like to say that the heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shannon, Patricia. That was amazing. That was beautiful. And Mary Corelli is a revelation to most of us. And most renowned Victorian novelist of the time. And Thelma, 600 pages. That's huge. And her 25 novels. That's a huge range as well. Then how she was celebrated by Queen Victoria, R.K. Narayana, William Gladstone, the Prime Minister. She's a real prodigy. So happy that you were able to give us such a wonderful, amazing writer to be celebrated. Thank you, Shannon. Now we'll have the next person. That is Sharon and Viju is there. Sharon and followed by Pravina. If Pravina is there, she can present, followed by Sharon Jemima. Pravina is there. Pravina, Sharon, and Viju is there, followed by Sharon Jemima, right? Yes,
So
Sharon,
shall I
you may.
present? Yes. So can you see my screen?
Yes, Sharon, it's visible, ma. It's visible, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. I have decided to talk about two writers, one from the past and other from the present. When I was pondering on whom should I choose or on whom should I give a talk on, I remembered one of my dad's advice. Though he had told lots of advices, the thing he kept reiterating was always give first priority to God and next to family. So when I was thinking on whom should I give a brief account, this flashed in my mind, and I decided, I will talk about my own family member who gave ample importance to God and set God above all and loved his family. He's none other than my own Tata, my forefather, Vedanayagam Sastriyar. And the next person I chose to talk about is Avyukta Bhattacharjee. She's my neighbor. She's in East Tambaram. So without wasting any more time, let me plunge into the first writer, Vedanayagam Sastriyar, my forefather. He was the first Christian Tamil poet in Tamil Nadu because before him, people used to translate the hymns written by the Europeans into Tamil and sing. But he was the first one to write hymns in Tamil. I think very few might have heard about him. But he's not known to the majority, even in Tamil Nadu. But outside Tamil Nadu, no one knows him. He had contributed a great deal, not only to Christianity or Christian literature, but to academics in general. So to begin with, I'll first talk about his biography and some of his works, and then I'll proceed to talk about his contribution to society on a whole.
Actually, there are lots of fascinating details about his personal life and about his ancestors, of whom he himself wrote a book called Sastra Purvottaram, for he cherished his parentage and ancestors a lot. There are also many interesting details about the story behind each songs he wrote, and his ministry, the criticisms he faced, and the praises showered on him. But due to time constraint, I will not poke my nose into all these and stick to my areas that I mentioned earlier. To talk about his biography, actually, Sastriar had 5 children. So he had 3 boys and 2 girls. All of them had written many books. Even his father, Devasagayam Pillai, had penned down many books. But Tata's biography was first written by his second son, Nova Jnanadikam Sastriyar. But as time went on, the copy grew old. So when it reached my great-grandfather, that is Vedanayagam Sastriyar's great-grandson, it became too old and started to fall apart. So what my great grandfather, Dr. Shen Vedanayagam Sastriyar, did was he wrote a modified version of Sastriyar's biography, and it was and it is this copy we have today. Tata was born on 7th September 1774 and reached the other shore, I mean the heavenly abode, on 24th January 1864. His parents were Devasagayam Pillai and Jnana Poo Ammal. Basically, we can't talk about Sastriyar without acknowledging his father, Devasagayam Pillai. Before becoming a Christian, his name was Arunachalam Pillai. He was a staunch Hindu believer, and during his teenage and early 20s, he was always preoccupied with the thought of finding the true God and having a deep communion with him. And what he did was he went to the temples, the Shiva temples, and started to read all the Vedas and Puranas. And he also practiced Kaya Siddhi. The priests were all very happy to see him show a great zeal towards their religion. So was his father, Arunachalam Pillai's father name was Ayya Perumal Pillai. But Arunachalam Pillai was a very clever man. He had a good memory. So he memorized all the Vedas and Puranas and started to recite them day and night to get closer to God. There are lots of interesting stories about his early youth and how he got converted to Christianity. But now I have to stick to my topic and time limit. So he was also good in philosophy. Basically, he was a very kind-hearted and generous person. Many people considered him as a philanthropist. He used to talk in a friendly way to everyone, unmindful of his caste, which annoyed his caste people because he was from an upper caste. As days went on, the temple priest and his family became bosom friends because of his interest in Hindu theology. But one fine day, he happened to meet a Catholic. He told him about Christ, and because he already had a sound knowledge in Hindu theology, he was able to decipher the truth and become a Christian. He didn't stop with that. He was a very brainy person, so he went on to learn the Latin language to get to know more about Jesus Christ and to know more about the Bible. It took him nearly 10 years to complete learning Latin language. After he had learned Latin language, he got baptized and changed his name from Arunachalam Pillai to Devasagayam Pillai. And once he changed his name to Devasagayam Pillai, he never used that old name, that is Arunachalam Pillai. He always identified himself as Devasagayam Pillai. And then he became a pastor, I mean a priest, a deacon in Catholic Church. He was the one who led his siblings and his parents to Christianity, towards the love of God, and his parents and siblings readily accepted Christ as the one true God and left all their olden ways. But this annoyed the temple priest and fellow relatives, so they constantly tortured his family violently. Even some of his wealths were confiscated by the relatives. Even then, as a family, they grew stronger in God's love and faith. He married Gnanapu Ammal, whose parents were already Christians. Devashagayam Pillai and Gnanapu Ammal had 3 children, that is 2 daughters and 1 son, and that 1 son is none other than my forefather Tata Vedanayagam Sastriya. But his original name was Veda Podagam Pillai. But his father used to affectionately call him as Vedanayagam Pillai, and that's how with time he came to be known as or considered as Vedanayagam Sastriya. But sadly, Gnanapu Ammal died when Tata was just 7. So he was sent to his maternal grandparents' house because his father, Devasagayam Pillai, wasn't able to manage things single-handedly because he was already working as a teacher and a priest. But Sastriya didn't concentrate on academics when he was in his grandparents' house. This caused his father worries. So he bought him from there and took care of him himself. But now there came a clash of ideas or doctrines between Sastriya's father, Devasagayam Pillai, and the Catholics. So the Catholics chucked him out of their community. And because of this reason, he went and became a preacher in Protestantism. To have a better education, Reverend Swartz, who was a Lutheran missionary Protestant, took Sastriya to Tanjore along with him and taught him various subjects. Surprisingly, Sastriya was a quick learner and learned a great deal in a very short span of time. He was good in many fields and had sound knowledge on all these fields like Tamil literature, English language, German language, mathematics, astronomy, theology, history, geography, and biblical science. He was well versed in Tamil literature and language. For many European missionaries like Bishop Robert Caldwell and Bishop Heber, and for many others, he had taught Tamil language. He had knowledge to a certain extent in German and English, and he has also written 1 or 2 books on these 2 languages. He was highly proficient in mathematics and astronomy. He had taught these subjects to many students and had penned down nearly 5 books in these areas. Theology was always close to his heart, and he was an voracious reader. Though he didn't enroll himself for a PhD, by seeing the knowledge he possessed on the scriptures and doctrines, the European missionaries and the natives honored him by giving Doctor of Theology. He has also written a humpty number of books on theology. Almost all of it was based on Martin Luther's view, Protestantism. He happened to read some of Martin Luther's works because of his knowledge in the German language. History and Sastriya were inseparable. He had sound knowledge on his family history, on which he had written a book, as I mentioned earlier, Sastra Purvotharam. He had written books on histories of the kings of Tamil Nadu and poets of India and European missionaries, mainly of the Lutheran Protestant missionary Reverend Swartz, who educated him from the period when he was 12 years old. He has also contributed a great deal to geography and biblical sciences. I'd like to highlight some of the famous works of Sastriya. The first work is The Blind Way, Kuruttu Vali. He wrote this book mainly to show the shortcomings of the Hindu theology and the Puranas, and to encourage people to turn their minds towards the Lord, one true God, Jesus Christ. As I said earlier, when talking about his father, Devasagayam Pillai, he had a sound knowledge in Hindu theology, and that enabled Sastriya to defend the Christian Protestant doctrines and beliefs. It's like a comparative theology. Some of Tata's grandfather, Ayya Perumal Pillai's relatives didn't accept Christ. So this was mainly written to bring him towards Christ. So the second book is Sastra Kummi. This is a special book which instructs Christians not to follow the Hindu superstitions, and also a special instruction for the upper caste Christians to accept the lower caste Christians as their own brothers and sisters without showing any discrimination. And the third book is Abolition of Fate. This book contains lots of powerful reasons to overcome the unbelief of the people who blindly believe that all things happen according to fate and destiny. The fourth book is Garland of Prayer. This book is full of amazing songs which talk about the events in Bible petitions. I really love this book a great deal because my dad knows many songs in it, and I too used to sing along with him. So the fifth book is The Last Judgment, and Jnana Ulam. This book talks about the end of days. Even from the days of Sastriya's grandfather and father, they were all eagerly waiting for the second coming of Christ, that is rapture. And the sixth book is Perinba Kadal. Seventh book is Bethlehem Kuravanji. Bethlehem Kuravanji, it is like an epic. Actually, it resembles the style of Kutrala Kuravanji, which is a very well-known work in Tamil literature. In Bethlehem Kuravanji, the Talavan is Christ and the Talavi is the church. And the Kurati, who prophesies about the coming of Talavan, is John the Baptist. He had constructed it beautifully with lots of metaphors, allegories, symbolism, and many other poetic ornaments. He has also written many letters, prose compositions, and poetry defending the Christian belief, that is Protestantism, against other belief systems that prevailed in India, mainly in Tamil Nadu. He had written somewhere around 400 to 500 kirtanai, that is hymns, poems. But as far as I know, only 50 to 75 is still in use. Mostly these poems are sang in church, that too mostly in Lutheran, TELC, and in CSI. In his period, he had educated many people in various fields, but he spent most of his time in Christian theology teaching. So when his disciples or the priest whom he educated had any doubts in doctrines of theology, they used to ask him, and he clarified their doubts and the doubts of the people around him. Here I have mentioned some of the most familiar hymns he had written. Let me read it out. Paadi Thudi Maname, ஆதி திருவார்த்தை சீரேசு நாதனுக்கு ஆகமங்கள் புகழ் வேதா நமோ நமோ சமாதானம் மோதும் ஏசு கிறிஸ்து ஏசுவையே துதிசை மனமே துதி தங்கிய பரமண்டல சுவிசேடக நாமம் ராஜராஜபிதா ஆமென் அல்லேலூயா மகத்துவ தம்பராபரா சரணம் சரணம் அனந்தா சச்சிதானந்தா பாவி நான் என்ன செய்வேன். So this hymn, Adi Thiruvarthai, it is a Christmas hymn, and in churches mostly they used to sing it as an offertory hymn during the Christmas. Amen Alleluia is a Resurrection Day hymn. So on a whole, he had composed more than 120 books, 81 books of poetry, 52 books of prose, 6 to 7 plays. His plays include Jnana Nondi Nadagam, which has lots of insights to Protestantism. So due to time crunch, I have just took a photo of his works. He had written it all. In his book, there are totally 130 books. These are the titles. So moving on to Sastriya's contribution to society. In his time, women were treated like commodities, and they were not given proper education. And girl babies were killed as soon as they were born. So Sastriya was against all these practices. He gave importance to women. Not only Sastriya, even his father, Devasagayam Pillai, treated women of his family in a respectable way. They never asked for dowry, which was a prominent thing in those days. He never blamed women blindly. In those days, people thought Eve was the main reason for the suffering of mankind. But Sastriya gave a new perspective to things and said Adam is equally responsible for what's happening there. Likewise, he always strived for equality among women. He gave equal rights to his children, mindful of their gender. He gave a good education. He had a which were into Tamil language for the benefit of the natives. He always wanted to abolish the caste differentiation. He strongly believed that all humans are created by one true God, Jesus Christ, the triune God, and therefore there shouldn't be any segregation among them. He had written lots of books on the superstitious beliefs of caste system. He had also written books on mathematics, history, biblical sciences, and geography and Tamil. Above all, he had contributed a great deal to Christian literature. This was his first preference and joy at all times. So I have taken some pics of the church where he spent most of his time. It's nearly a 300-year-old church. And his educator, Reverend Swartz, was the first Presbyterian of this church. The name of this church is CSI St. Peter's. I'm not good in taking photos, so when I took this photo, it was looking very beautiful, but when I placed it in PPT, it became a little tilted. Forgive me for that. So the next photo is, this is the place from where he had written lots of books. The church management had renovated it now. And also this is the passage that leads to the churchyard, I mean the graveyard. If you see keenly, you can see an arch over here on which it is written Maritor Evarum Uyirthelluvar, and this is the entrance to graveyard. So finally, here lies the body of my ancestor, my forefather, Vedanayagam Sastriyar, and this is the epitaph written on his tomb. Let me read it out. Sacred to the memory of Vedanayaka Sastriyar, evangelical poet of Tanjore, whose eminent character as a Christian zeal for the cause of his God and Savior and unwearied endeavors to promote it in the earth deserve to be everlasting remembrance. He was a native of Tirunelveli, but educated by the Venerable C.F. Swartz, he devoted his time and talents to the cause of Christ, composed 120 books, and taught his children to follow his example. He departed this life on Sunday, January 24th, 1864, aged 92 years. The righteous shall be in everlasting remembrance. His children shall have a place of refuge. Psalms 1:12:6 and Proverbs 14:26. Though Sastriyar had written a lot and contributed a great deal to society, when I searched in Google, there is barely any information about him. All I could find was he was a court poet during the reign of Seraphoji II in Tanjore. Even now, most of the books I mentioned are nowhere available. They can be found among his descendants. Other than his descendants, he remains unheard to this world. So the next person I have decided to talk on is Avyukta Bhattacharjee. She's my neighbor. She's in East Tambaram. Avyukta never socializes. She always runs away from people. She's an introvert, and that made her to develop her writing skills. So just to keep her mind occupied, she decided to make paper and pen as her bosom friends. She feels comfortable when she's alone and writing about the things around her. She has a naughty little dog named Lucky and also a pussycat. So she writes books on them. Her novel, her debut novella is titled as Diary of a Lucky Dog. In this work, she describes her life with her pet dog, which always keeps her busy. She also describes about the mischiefs done by the dog. This book is filled with lots of humor and captivates the reader. She describes everything, even the minute details greatly. So this makes the readers to feel themselves as a silent character in her novella. She's only a child, 12 years old. During this lockdown, she has started to write. She's also good in painting and pencil sketch. This book, A Diary of a Lucky Dog, is available in Amazon and Flipkart. At present, she is working on her second novella. I think she'll publish it shortly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sharon Jemima, for those two wonderful poets, writers, Vedanayagam Sastriyar and Avyukta Bhattacharjee. And well, Vedanayagam Sastriyar is a well-known face, and I'm so happy to know that you are his great grandchild. The way, the sweep, the range of his writing is amazing. I have just two questions for you, Sharon. What would you consider his top three Kirtanagal for you? First one, your favorites of your great
Yes,
grandfather. Yeah.
I like Samadhana Modu Mesu Christu above all, and Amen Alleluia, and then Nambi Vanden.
Okay, great. And what do you think is the difference between Kirtanai and Pamalai? Sharon.
Yes, Pamala is basically a translated work of the Europeans, whereas Kirtanai has the style of Tamil Nadu. It has that unique style with all those Pallavi, Anupallavi, and Saranangal.
Very good, very good. Thank you. So what are you going to do? No, you said as his great grandchild, you said no, most of his works are not available. So how do you think you can take this forward in your own way, like celebrate him for the near future? Have you any plans for that to celebrate his memory?
Yes, sir. Actually, I thought of translating some of his works into English because most of his works are in Tamil, and that too ancient Tamil. So many people aren't able to understand what he has written. Myself and my dad's cousin, Nova Vedanayagam Sastriyar, as well as I have two more cousins in Chennai. We have all planned to translate his works so that it will be available for the upcoming generations.
Very good. Wishing you the best in your endeavors, Sharon. And about Avyukta Bhattacharjee, I think we can invite her one day to your class, second MA class, to have a talk to us, concerning relating to her novella. It will be a motivation for others also. If possible, you can ask her one day. We'll provide her with a decent honorarium also.
Sir, actually, she's very hesitant to talk to me.
Okay.
She doesn't even talk to her parents that freely. Even she's very shy girl, sir.
Right, I understand. Okay, fine. Then in that case, we can celebrate this unheard voice by ordering her books on Amazon, right, and reviewing this book. That'll be a great motivation for this wonderful kid to come out, right? Good, Sharon. Thank you. And
Thank you, sir.
yeah, Sharon. The other Sharon has not responded today, and Praveen also, right, hasn't. So they'll forfeit this chance. In the next class, Shruti, Sunanta, Susan, Akash, and Jesse Raj, right? You will get a chance, followed by the last batch on 9th November, right? The last 6 will get a chance on that day. Thank you all for being patient listeners, and we have celebrated some wonderful unheard melodies today. All these melodies, unheard melodies, you guys spoke straight from the heart, and that's why it cuts eyes with us. And the coming days also, we expect you. And I would be so happy. I'm just giving you a clue. Whoever has spoken on an unheard voice, in the past 1 month or 2 months, if you can work for your MA project on that instead of working on a celebrated author, hats off to you, right? I promise you that we will even publish this work that you are going to do as part of your MA dissertation, right? We'll publish it free of cost for you if possible, right? So if you can do, because no other person would have celebrated the range of writers that we have celebrated in the past 1 or 2 months. Amazing. So this is a clue and a cue for all of you who are celebrating. It could be even a 12-year-old kid, but what do you find special about these children's voices, in this particular novella, for example, or the writers whom we have discussed in the past? It could be regional writers, anybody for that matter. Please, it's a call for you to celebrate them even in your MA dissertation, right? Whatever resources you need or suggestions or guidance you need, we're always there for you. We'll help you out, right? So thank you. That's all for now. We'll meet again. This afternoon you have a program. We'll meet again there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.